Well, it says 7 o'clock, so why don't we get started with the regular city council meeting of the city of Prospect, Kentucky. Today is January 11th, 2021. And it looks to me like we have all 6 members of the council present, as well as John Embry, Herb Schulhafer, Linda Knox, Linda Wardell, and the city attorney, Chris Gorman. Having called the meeting to order, the first order of business is to consider approving the minutes of the last regular city council meeting on December 14th.
I move to approve. I move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye. Hey, John, could you speak up a little bit? It's hard hearing you in here.
Oh, that was deliberate, Frank. No, I'm kidding.
Well, that's why I asked you.
Yeah. Next order of business is my report. Several things. Not necessarily in any order, but you should know that our bookkeeper, Len Mariani, resigned last week.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you at all.
Well, I'm sitting close to the thing. What can I do about it?
Ron, we can hear him good. Is there anything on that on your end that they can do?
How about now, Sandra?
I heard that. That was good.
Okay, well, I'll try to keep my voice up. Len resigned due to health reasons. We will begin interviewing tomorrow and Wednesday candidates for that position. Several of the resumes we have received so far look very good. Number 2, in the lawsuit concerning the Viridian LUD project, the complaint has now been amended. Really changes the complexion because it now alleges that the land in question was never actually rezoned for apartments. Apparently back then in the 70s, the early 70s, rezoning was done by the county fiscal court, and they didn't do it by ordinance with 2 readings. They just did a resolution, and that was ineffective. At least that's what the allegation is. And the lawsuit, however, does continue to seek an injunction and a declaratory judgment. Third, the Parks Committee has been very active this past month with regard to the Putney Pond situation and finding answers to the silting problems. I'm going to leave the explanation about that to Linda Wardell in her report when she makes it. I want to report that as of December 31st, we have spent only 45% of our annual budget, and also report that we now have received another $103,000 of CARES money. Let's see what else. Before I get to the next item, I want to give Greg Hulsman the opportunity to explain why he and I are wearing blue. Greg.
Well, thank you. I consider that an honor, and I don't mean to take that away from you, but you've given it to me. So I noticed that last week was Law Enforcement Appreciation Week. Technically, it ended Saturday, but here we are meeting just a couple of days after that. So I know that I speak for all of us in saying how very much, and honestly, we appreciate our fine officers and entire staff of our police department here in the city of Prospect. So I have only a cup of tea here, but cheers to you. Thank you so much for all that you do, police department.
I'll second that motion. Yeah. More valuable than ever. Finally, I'm going to ask Laura, rather than giving a mixed up version from me, I'll ask Laura to describe what we've been doing regarding getting a new website. Laura, can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
So we, right before the end of December, we signed a contract to redesign the website with Civic Plus. They are a company that specializes in municipal websites. And for some examples, they've done the websites for J-Town, Georgetown, Frankfurt, several others here in Kentucky and all over the country. And they're a well-respected company. We just signed the contract with them, so we haven't really done a whole lot of work. Ron and I participated in a implementation discussion meeting with one of their designers earlier today. That is going to be for an add-on module called Civic Ready, which will enable us to send out mass communications to residents. This is similar to the email blasts that we do, but we'll be able to do this by email. We'll be able to do it by text message. It won't be limited to sending out messages when City Hall is open. If something comes up over the weekend, say there's flooding in Fox Harbor, the police officer on duty can send out an alert to everybody saying, stay away from that area. So it will certainly expand our opportunities for communicating with residents. Another feature that will be on the website is a module called See, Click, Fix, which will provide the opportunity for people to submit reports to the city of issues going on throughout the city. One example they like to tell us about is, say somebody is going for a hike on the Orange Trail and they notice that a tree has fallen across the trail. Well, all they have to do is pull out their smartphone, take a picture, go to the city website, submit the picture and a report, and it will go to Ron and he can send his guys out to clear up the tree. So that also will improve communications between residents and the city. So we're supposed to be having some planning and design meetings next week, and we're really looking forward to this.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about that or anything that I've said? If not, we'll move on into committee reports, and the first one is ethics, and that's John Embry.
Good evening, everybody. And I assume I can be heard.
Yes.
Just a quick reminder, the ethics forums are now due on the first business of March. I have back in my possession, I think 11, if I count mine. And just the warning to folks, particularly in the committee, on the committees, the sworn committees, forestation, code enforcement, and of course my own committee. The pages that are labeled 2, 3 be filled out. If you own a house in Prospect, just because you put the address in the general information, you still need to fill that out. Personal income on page 3, the personal income, that is earned income, I think is the best way to say it, over $10,000 by anyone in the household. So if your evil cousin-in-law is there and making money and you're stuck with him, you need to report his income. Other than that, that's all. Hopefully I don't need to bug you guys again until March, and hopefully then I can say I've got them all. And if I don't have them all, that means, we've got something else to talk about. None. Have a good meeting, folks.
John, thank you for doing that. You do it every year, and it's sometimes like pulling teeth, and most people get them in on time. The next report is from Parks and Recreation, and that's Linda Wardell.
Thank you, Mayor. The Parks Committee met last week, and the bulk of our meeting was consumed by discussing the Ecotech proposal for work in Putney Pond and also Harrods Creek Park. And I believe that the mayor sent a copy of the proposal out to all of the council members, so you should have it and hopefully have read it. So I would like to just talk a little bit about Ecotech. I was very pleased that in their proposal, they also talked about other work that they have done in the area, especially the extensive work that they've done in the parklands of Floyd's Fork, which was close to a $2 million contract, and the work taking place over a number of years. I did speak with the project manager of 21st Century Parks to get a reference on Ecotech, and he said that they are extremely pleased with the work that that company has done. So I feel very comfortable in recommending that we move forward with this company to do the work in our parks. The Putney Pond evaluation is, I think, information we really need to decide what our options are with that property. And the plan is that they will make an evaluation of the property, look at sediment rates, possible mitigation or other uses of the property, and come back with recommendations and some potential budget estimates for the various options that they see as available to us. And as they noted in the report or in the proposal, they will be using another company called Sustainable Streams. And I've talked to several people about that company. They come also very highly recommended. In fact, their principal, whose name is Bob Hawley, is he's been described to me as the most knowledgeable person in the area about stream and wetlands management. So I was very pleased that they were recommending that that company would be part of the evaluation process. In regards to the Harrods Creek Park, the proposal is to do some invasive plant removal. In the past, we have tried to do some of this on our own with volunteers, and we've made some pretty good progress. And those of you who have visited the parks over the years I think you will remember that every year our wildflowers are better than the previous year, meaning that once we remove some of these invasive plants, it gives our native plants the ability to come back and be even better than the prior year. What we found is that the areas that remain are a little more difficult to treat, a little more difficult to do with volunteers, because some of the areas are steep. We have a lot of our volunteers, like me, are getting a little older. A lot of people don't want to deal with using things like chainsaws and big clippers. People also are uncomfortable using herbicides, especially given some of the recent information about Roundup and similar products. So I just really feel that one of the best things we can do for our parks is to remove the invasives, improve the environment for our native plant and animal species, and let the experts, people that really know what they're doing, help us get this under control. You will note that the proposal is sort of a 3-year process. I know we can only budget 1 year at a time, but I think it's important for us to know that the first year is the big year. The next year, they will come back, treat new things that sprout either from the roots or from the seed bed. And then the third year, again, treat them. The hope is that once we get this really under control, we will be able to manage it moving forward using volunteers, because the big heavy lifting will have already been done. So that's why I'm proposing with my committee's agreement that we move forward with Ecotech for both of these projects.
Sarah and Don were both in on that meeting, and I didn't know if they give them the opportunity to add anything they want. Okay, I guess you covered it.
Thanks, Linda. Yeah,
Actually, I've got a couple of questions if we're there.
Sure.
Sure.
First of all, I want to thank you. I thought that was an excellent report and very detailed. And so a tiny few questions. In regard to Putney Pond, will they also be looking at the structure of the spillway?
That is an excellent question. They did say that they are going to look at, and I can certainly go back to them, but I think they said that they will be looking at, I've got it up here, the all right, where is this? A site view to view, a cursory site visit to view the existing pond and outlet conditions. So the spillway would be the outlet.
Okay, the reason I'm interested is because as we've worked on different things, parts of that spillway were put in there in the 40s, 1940s. And there have been additions to it. It's been worked on since then. But if we're looking at doing something long-term, I'd like to make sure that it's safe, because of course that drains right into the harbor.
Right.
And it probably is right now, but I don't know that it will be in 5 years.
We can certainly make sure that if we move forward with this, that we ask them to evaluate that as well.
Oh, thank you. Mike, in question in regard to the invasive plants, and I totally understand what you're saying. I'm a gardener, and invasive plants and weeds, I do a beautiful job of growing both of them. If they're going to use an herbicide, are they going to use it in such a way that it doesn't kill off the seeds of these wildflowers? And if they are, I'd like to know what their method is, because I certainly haven't come up with one.
Well, they are definitely going to very closely target the spraying. They will be using, they will be cutting the large, mostly shrubs and vines, and painting them with the herbicides. And then they also said that in subsequent years, they will use foliar spraying and be sure that it's thoroughly wet, but not to the point of runoff. And they talked about targeting invasive. It says targeted invasives will be spot sprayed because risk of damage to desirable native plants species is high. So they are very much aware that we need to really mitigate the damage to native plants. I will also say that what we have found when we've, with volunteers, made attempts to remove some of the invasives, especially the bush honeysuckle, we typically try to do that removal when native plants are dormant, because the invasives, they leaf out more quickly in the spring.
Yes, they do.
And they keep their leaves more
Longer.
later into the fall. And so with, our kind of resident expert, Jacqueline McGrail, we have often targeted working on those plants when our natives are dormant, either in the early spring or in the late fall. And one of the questions when I met with Lee Droppelman, who's the president of Ecotech, when I met with him, I said, well, I guess you couldn't do any work until spring. And he said, actually, anytime the air temperature is over 40 degrees, there still is vascular activity in these invasive plants. And he said a lot of times it's easier for us to work to remove them in the sort of dormant time. So, today and tomorrow would not be appropriate, but later this week it's supposed to be 50. So I think they will be timing any work that they do to make sure that the conditions are optimal and that they mitigate or they reduce or minimize any damage to native plants.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Linda, Mrs.
Yes.
Did your committee come up with a recommendation on which option to support?
My committee, of course, would like to do it all. But I think my preference is for option one, but I'm not sure that we've got the funding to do that. I know that we'll be talking about the budget amendment later. I had suggested to the mayor that we try to put in the budget for this year $10,000. My suggestion to my committee is option two, year one is $7,200. I'd still like to keep it at 10,000 because there are some areas in option one that are very steep, very difficult for volunteers to get to. And what I would like to do, assuming council approves spending $10,000 in year one, I would like to go back to Lee and say, okay, what can you do for $10,000? We know you can do option number two for 7,200. Let's figure out the best areas to add to that and stay within that $10,000 budget. So that's my recommendation to the committee. I'm not sure when Lee was putting this proposal together, I'm not sure that he understood that our year end is June 30th. I think they definitely could get that much done before the end of this fiscal year. That will give us a little bit of time to evaluate the work that they've done and to also allow us time to make a plan for the subsequent years and say, okay, we did option two plus these two areas in the first year. Next fiscal year, let's add a couple of other areas. So it would be a sort of year two on what you've done this year, and then add a couple of areas that would become year one in fiscal year 22. I don't know if that answers your question, but.
Well, yes, it does. But why would you discount
Frank, I can't understand you. Something happened.
Okay. My microphone. Okay. My question was why not option three? The park this year, as I understand it, have been used quite frequently, and as a result of people having cabin fever and wanting to get out, and because of the COVID restrictions, and we have windfall money associated with COVID, and one of the things that in our city that the COVID is. Forcing people to, I don't know, forcing is a word, but people are using to a great extent the parks. Why would we not just take that money and go for the whole?
If council is prepared to do that, that's fine with me.
If I can just add one input for the, since Linda, you have done a lot of research on Ecotech, just for all of us to be aware of, I think if you go above 30,000 for them for a contract, you'll have to put it out to bid. So that would be the only thing that I'd mention for people to think about is, 10K for invasive plants, 10K for the Putney Pond study. You could basically increase by 10K. And then outside of that, my understanding is you'd have to put it out to bid, which does not necessarily mean that you would end up with Ecotech. So in terms of the research and whatnot, I'd just put that out there that Frank, I'm with you on the, we've got the money. But I just as an input, I'd love for Linda to be able to keep the company she's done research on, but to my understanding, it would be only 10K is out there to increase if that's understanding is correct.
Well, there's a couple of things going on there. Number one, those are two very distinct projects. They're not one project. The second thing is that just because we have to go out to bid does not mean that Ecotech can't bid on both of those projects. In other words, what I'm saying is I don't think that nickel and diming the parks because we're afraid of bidding is necessarily prudent. What's the total if she got all the money?
Somewhere
The-
around 42,000.
How much?
It'd be
Option-
50 for,
Option 3 for Harrods Creek invasive removal, year one is $45,000.
but that's two projects, correct?
No, Putney
No.
Pond is 10,000. Harrods Creek, option 3 is 45,000.
Okay.
And I guess whether it needs to be out to bid, the one disadvantage of going above that limit and having to bid on it is I don't know how long it will take, to identify other companies, get them to come out, write a proposal. We might be at the end of the fiscal year.
Yeah, it seems to me it makes sense. It makes sense to go ahead with the $10,000 for each of the projects. The year's halfway over. See how those progress and take a look at what's appropriate for next year's budget.
Yeah, that money's not going anywhere.
No reason to let it burn a hole in our pocket.
All that cares money.
Do you mind getting your mic? Sorry.
Space. Maybe this is better. The qualifications, I don't know that there are that many qualified people to bid on it. Are there, Linda?
I'm aware of a company in Bloomington, Indiana. There probably are other companies around the Louisville area, but I would have to, I'd have to go back and try to research that a little bit.
I remember it's been a long time ago, but we were trying to eradicate the tree of heaven. And this was when the Forestation Board first started. It might have been the year after it started. And there was a gentleman named Peter Barber who was with the Forestation Department. And I know that he identified, I think it was two firms that did that kind of work, but we decided to tackle it ourselves. So we could check with him or with the Forestation Department and find out who else was out there to do it.
Well,
The other thing I will say is that several years ago, we do have some experience with Ecotech. A few years ago, it was not long after we opened the trails in Harrods Creek Park. They actually came to us and did a demonstration project where they spent one day in Harrods Creek Park up near the Montero Drive trailhead and another day around Putney Pond. And they did some invasive removals. And of course, they did a demonstration project because they were hoping that they would get a contract to do more work. And at that time, we just didn't have the support to get budgeted money to move ahead with that. But we were very happy with the work that they did then. I guess I'm happy to do whatever the council would like. If I'm directed to go out and try to find other companies and get other proposals, I think I'm happy to do that. I do fear that if we delay too much, we run the risk of not being able to get some of this work done in this fiscal year. So that's my concern about delaying.
But could you, and I guess Chris, I see you there getting ready for the football game. Couldn't we create a contract for less than whatever the bid requirement is with an option to proceed further? Is that okay?
You mean and if we did the option, it would go over the amount?
Have an option to increase it.
No,
No,
I don't think so.
yeah, I agree.
I don't think,
But on the other hand, this is more complicated. It's been mushed together, but there are two very separate projects here. And we already know we can do some of them. And it seems to me that it would make sense to look at what we have in the budget, at what these projects would do if some money went into each one. And we may not be able to do everything, but we probably can do more than what's in some of these options.
I agree with you, Sandra. I think, we couldn't accept this proposal as is anyway, because it's multiple year proposal.
Exactly.
We would need a contract. The way I see it is we would need a contract for this fiscal year. And I think it should be two contracts, one for Putney Pond and Woodlands and the other for Harrods Creek invasive removal.
I totally agree with you.
that makes sense.
I like the idea of making sure that we're right before we proceed. And Linda, I thought I heard you say that you wanted more discussion with your committee and also that you wanted to get back with Lee Tucci. So it sounds like we have some things we want to check on first to make sure we're right. So maybe we come back and revisit this soon. But it sounds like we're not ready tonight.
I think we could, I know that the council is going to be considering a budget amendment later in the meeting. I certainly think that money could be budgeted for both of these projects, even if we don't have all the details of a contract figured out.
I agree with you as long as what we do is a detail budget amendment and not a global one.
I can't speak to that.
I know.
Well, I'd like to get a sense of just a sense of the council. But I'm pro getting things done once and for all when we have the money, and I think the parks are worth it. We've nickel-dimed the parks for years because of budget constraints, and I think that the right way to do this is do it all, and then we have something to be, really proud of. So, I mean, is there anybody that feels differently, wants to keep?
I do slightly, Frank. I am in agreement with you as far as wanting to do something. I don't want to rush into it though. And I don't think we're ready right now. I would like for Linda to come back to us after she's talked to her committee and with Lee Tucci, and let's let them let us know. It sounds like we're rushing into it a little bit tonight, even though that we agree with it. But we have questions that we still don't have answers to, and I would like to know that first.
Well, I think the point was made that we could allocate the money in the budget concurrent with what Linda and her committee are doing. Just
Oh, sorry,
you know,
Frank.
and move forward that way.
Well, I think Linda and her committee before, it sounds like we're all on board. And the only issue is how do we accomplish whatever? I don't think that, I think when Linda just did a summary, she got the picture very clearly. 1-year contract, 2 separate contracts. And we look at how much each of those needs to be for a 1-year period of time. And if we had that on the agenda for the February meeting by itself, I think we could put it to bed right then and there.
I would fully support that. I think that's a great idea.
My thought is keep at a minimum, I think outside of Greg, it sounds like everybody is in support of doing at least what the money has sort of been allocated. So the 10K and 10K is what it sounds like. So my recommendation is we at least keep that. I'd love if the compromise is Greg at a no, Don at a keep what we have, Frank and Sandra at a go higher. I'd love for the compromise to at least be, we keep what we have. Let's get Ecotech to start. They can start within 10 days. Let's get them to start ASAP as soon as the weather is above 40 degrees, the conditions are perfect for them to do it. We can evaluate their work at the same time. And then if we're all on board, poof, we can jump in there and start doing some extras and then really do full big projects. But I would hate to, my worst case tonight is we walk away with a, let's wait, because I think that's counterintuitive to
I
what we're all
don't
talking about.
think that we need to wait, and I don't think we need to limit it to 2 $10,000 amounts. I think that there's not going to be any bills to pay before the end of February.
Okay, do we want to take it up when we get to the budget then? It sounds like everybody's on.
Well, if you have $45,000 in the budget, you certainly can execute a $10,000 contract. They're not mutually exclusive. And then if we move farther, we'll have the money there anyway.
And Frank, that meets all, I mean, that's fine with me in terms of, I just didn't want to make Linda wait, you know, but it sounds like you're not saying that. So,
Yeah, I don't get the feeling Linda's waiting. I think she's done quite a bit.
very, very true. I just saw her, the facial expressions were becoming tragic with the, no, wait. So I just wanted to advocate on her behalf as well. So sorry, Linda.
Yeah, I would hate to say we're not going to make a decision on anything until February. If we know we've got dollars in the budget, we can move forward to answer whatever questions. And I would like to be sure we can actually get something done in this fiscal year.
Actually, you can move forward, but you've got to think through the process so that we end up complying with the law that regards bids.
So my question to our counsel, our attorney, is if we have a $10,000 contract for Putney Pond, a second contract, would we be able to do as much as $30,000 without putting it out to bid? Or I don't know how that works.
Okay, you're saying they're totally separate projects?
Yeah, they really are.
They're separate
They've only
projects.
been combined because they talked to one firm, but the projects aren't the same at all. One,
Aren't service contracts dealt with differently? Do
No.
service contracts come under the same?
Still the $30,000 limit, Greg, but the fact that they're two separate projects, I think we can go ahead and do it that way. Yeah, if they're two separate projects, I don't have any problem with it.
yeah, one deals with the future and the other deals with today. I mean, they're not even, in terms of the work they're going to perform, it's not even the same. Now, in the meantime, if I'm looking at what we've got correctly, there's already $15,000 in the budget. Is that correct?
From the original one, Sandra, is that what you're looking at? The original 15K?
Yeah, without any changes, it looks like we've got $15,000.
Yeah. Now 7,500. Now somebody jump in if I'm wrong.
Right.
7,500 of that was already spent on that catastrophic rain event for the canoe launch.
Yeah, I think
1,000 of
you're right.
that is for the Cali Park drainage, and then 6,500 of that is normal park maintenance. So like tree removal when it falls, you know, like
Okay, but the
fence
tree
repair,
removal,
lock repair.
the tree removal is not taking place now, isn't that correct?
No, not forestation tree removal. I'm sorry, I'm talking about like a tree falls on something in the parks and
Right,
and they
but
have to
right
go out.
now, if we look at the money available, there's 7,000 something.
$7,900.
Yeah, and so I don't, knowing Linda, I don't think she's going to wait. We're not putting anything on hold by having her talk to her committee and come back to us.
And going back to something Frank said earlier, the amended budget that'll be considered includes a $26,000 increase for parks maintenance. Does that, if that were to pass, wouldn't that fund these projects?
Yeah, so Doug, it would be, sorry, Linda, do you want to talk to?
No, I'm I'm a little confused about, I agree that the original maintenance budget was 15. We've spent roughly half of that. I'm reluctant to spend the rest of it, not knowing if there might be some unforeseen things happen that we need that money for.
Ron might wanna
Only
take himself off
unforeseen
mute
in the
if
next
he's-
30 days or 5 weeks.
Doug, the answer to your question is that the 26,000, which is proposed in this amended budget, is 10,000 for Putney, 10,000 for the invasive plants in Harrods Creek Park, 5,000 for other work in Harrods Creek Park, graveling the rest of that hill back there, and 1,000 making 26,000. The 1,000 is the gift from Dr. Aaron's, also to be spent in Harrods Creek Park.
Right.
So there's the 26.
And I guess my point though is I do think it sounds like we're all in agreement to fund this project, and it looks to me, as I look at it, the proposed amended budget will accomplish what Linda's asking us to do.
Yeah.
Well, that was the intent.
Here's my concern. If I remember, and I don't have it in front of me right now, but the Ecotech proposal was divided into 2 parts. One part was 10K for the Putney Pond, and the other part was 3 options for the invasive plant removal. And those 3 options transpired over 3 separate years. So depending upon which option we take, that changes the amount of money in each of the first years, especially the first year. Linda, am I wrong on that?
No, that's exactly right. And the option 1 was 12,300, which addresses the areas of biggest concern for the invasives. Option 2 was less than that, and that would only clear the invasives within a perimeter of the existing trails. And then option 3 was to do the entire park.
So,
If I remember option 3 correctly, wasn't it 40-something thousand the first year?
Yes,
45,000 the first year.
Are you saying, Linda, that there is no money currently in the budget for any of these options? Is that correct?
Well, I would think that we could take some of that remaining $6,000 to $7,000 to add to the 10,000 we're asking for, which is why I think we could get to option 2 fairly easily. I would be very, very reluctant to spend all of that money on this particular project just because we don't know if something unforeseen is going to happen. I guess we can always come back to council in an emergency situation and ask for additional funds, but I just don't know that it would be prudent to spend all of the remaining budget on this.
Well, I'm not saying that, and I'd like to at least think about option 1, which is more money. But the thing is, I agree with what Frank said. The parks have received a lot of additional use just because of COVID. And the COVID money is one time only. You don't, in my mind, put that kind of money into an ongoing expense. But in terms of this isn't an ongoing expense. And it feels like it really is a very prudent use of some of that COVID money. And I'd like you not to think as cheaply as we've always had to think in the past.
It's hard to teach an old dog a new trick.
Sandra,
We
now
could-
what are your thoughts on a combination of what Frank was talking about, where if we can put the money up, as in put it in the budget for Linda, she's ready to go. Let's get her to move on what she wants to get started, and then kind of compromise with what Frank's saying. Hey, the money will be in the budget. So if she wants to then put it out to bid in the background, hey, Ecotech has done a great job. See how the bids come out, but the money's already there. You're right. If she doesn't spend it, it kicks back. But in this meeting, and then there'll have to be whatever the follow-up meeting to get this. But then the money will be there for her with a caveat that says, if you go above 30,000 for one project, it must go out to bid. Just so we don't inadvertently put her in a bad spot. We give her 45K and then tell her, yeah, sure, do whatever you want. When in reality, that's not actually the case. What
No,
were your two
I agree.
thoughts
We
on
can't do that. But the other part of all of this is the fact that until she talks to her committee and comes back to us, we don't know exactly what to put in the budget.
Can I speak? I feel bad because I'm the one talking. Now, actually, a lot of us were there. I'm actually on the committee, so you can tell me to be quiet whenever you're prepared for me to stop talking. But we did speak actually, because Harold was a huge advocate of doing the whole thing, just get it done. We did come in later and discuss the part about taking it out to bid and kind of pros and cons of that, not to discourage, but just like let's get it moving. We're almost done with the fiscal year, kind of going into what Don's saying earlier. And then we did come back around to Carolyn Embry had mentioned, hey, there is a way to combine the option 1 and option 2. They actually do completely different areas of the park, i.e. option 2 is 25 feet along the entire trail. Option 1 is a kind of consolidated northern portion near the Orange Trail. So they really do different things. And so Linda mentioned she knows that she'd be able to go, hey, Ecotech, I have X amount of money. She's not stuck in those options, but to take care of, hey, everything that we walk on the trails, plus some really bad areas. And she felt really confident. So we did end, the committee did end with, Linda, we are comfortable with what you decide, and that we know that what you were going to communicate was somewhere between, hey, we can do it all, and we can take the money at a minimum of what is proposed and cater it with Ecotech, and we trusted her. So we actually have had this contingency talk in the committee. So I did want to jump in there that everybody's saying, hey, she needs to go back to the committee. We actually did talk through all of this, and we're in solid agreement to back her. So just FYI.
We've had the invasive plants there for a long time, and they're going to be there for years to come. It's going to take 3 years just to make a dent in them. So again, I don't see a need to rush. What concerns me is that we have gone to Ecotech, and they have given us a proposal back. And that proposal consists of 3 options. But what we're really talking about now is going back and saying, well, we want a 4th option, but we didn't ask them for that pricing. So,
You know what, Greg, that's not really correct, because after I received this information from Lee, I talked to him and I said, number 1, we budget 1 year at a time. Number 2, I don't know how much money we'll have. And he said, we can work with you. He said, I was trying to give you a range of proposals to meet various budget constraints. But he said, we are willing to work with you in timing and in scope. And we can, we can figure this out. So I don't think it would be unexpected for us to go back to him and say, okay, city council approved X amount of dollars. What can we do? How do we figure out which are the best areas to treat? And I think that's kind of a normal thing. I don't think it's a take it or leave it.
Because they're going to have to rewrite those contracts anyways. Yeah.
And the point was made that we have all this money from CARES Act currently, but the point I want to make is, to the extent that we don't spend it in the current fiscal year, it's not going to go away. It'll be in the bank and we can budget it next year, which we're going to really start working on a proposed budget in March, a couple of months. So we're getting, well toward the next fiscal year now, and we can always take care of it in the upcoming fiscal budget.
Well, and I do think there's a lot of consensus on the council, it sounds like, but this isn't an action item. This is a report. It's an excellent report, but I'm not sure there's much more for us to do with this right now. I mean, we're not being asked during this report to take any action, I don't think.
No, you're not.
Okay, well, I'm suggesting we squash this bug about as flat as we're going to squash it, and we move on to forestation.
I agree. So said, let's do the forestation board report from Linda Knox.
Hello, everyone. Lee is still enjoying family time in Connecticut, but we hear from him, so he does know what's going on. Our committee is not meeting until tomorrow, and we will be discussing the increased budget for planting this year, and we're just thrilled about it. And I will be doing my report later this week, and I just have a couple of things to share tonight. One is we talked about there were 2 trees that have been approved for removal. The spruce in the Hunting Creek Island has been done. The oak tree in Cali Park has not been completed. The other project that's occurred, we had some feedback talking about the use of native trees in our planting guides, and we have revised that completely. Andrea Hanlon did a fabulous job identifying and calling out our official tree list with an update of what's native, and she's added some comments about strengths and weaknesses of some of the different varieties of trees that are on our list. And so when I send my report after tomorrow's meeting, I will send you a copy of that new list. I think you'll find it very interesting. And that's all I have for now.
Any questions for Linda? Okay, thank you. Any report on the library or the history book? Things have really shut down due to COVID.
Just very briefly, in terms of the library, as you know, we're dying to have a used book sale. And we have looked at Locust Grove, who's been handling theirs through this entire time. One of the issues with Locust Grove that sounded like it was a very good idea was having people make appointments. But I have talked to and been to the Locust Grove book sale, and that hasn't been working. People don't show up, and there are hours where nothing's going on. And the number of books sold overall is very low. So our library is going to have to wait until we actually can have people up there, and we can spread them out. We can socially distance. We can be safe, but it looks like we're going to have to get to the next step after some vaccinations before we can have our sale. In regard to the history book, by accident is sometimes how we find things out. And at talking to one of our council members, Mr. Gibson, we ended up with a very interesting story on Mr. Snowden, the one who ended up We got to know him because of the general store. And we're going to be interviewing Mr. Gibson to put some of his stories in the book. In addition to that, Mr. Gibson doesn't know it yet, but we have developed a skill and talent that we didn't have before. For those of you who have Word, there is a little thing up in the right-hand corner where you can dictate. And we are going to try to put Mr. Gibson's thing into there. As you know, we found quickly that we had to transcribe the interviews that we've done, because after you've done more than 100, you can't remember anything anymore. And we ended up finding a method where they probably are done someplace in China or something, but the prices have been very reasonable. I'm not worried about the price, but I'd love to have more control over outcome. And so after we interview Mr. Gibson, we're going to try to push him through Word to a transcription. We'll let you know how that works. That's it.
Thank you.
Hey, Sandra, for the book set, do you think with some volunteer labor that you'd be able to have it outside? Would that increase any of your potential or no?
We can't run the risk of rain. I mean,
Okay.
books are, you know,
Oh, well,
we
yeah.
had a long talk about that because it's a perfectly valid point, but it just, the whole process takes about 3 or 4 weeks.
Okay.
And to
Yeah.
think that Kentucky's not going to have bad weather in that length of time, I don't think global warming's that far yet.
Gotcha.
And you do
Thank
know
you.
that it's winter.
Yes, we know. It's 26 out there.
Moving into the police report, is Jeff Sherrod here? Or Tony Denham?
Yes, I'm here.
Or would you like to give a report?
Okay, I'm ready. For the year, just as we anticipated, COVID, our number of down significantly. In the past, we had on average probably 300.
Can't hear you, Jeff.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
That sounds like a crummy commercial. Okay, in the past, we generally take about 300 reports a year. On average, that includes all of our accident reports and offense reports. In 2020, we only had 172 reports total. So that tells you how slow everything was last year. 2019 was 270, and in 2018, it was about 315. So you can see how things have sort of slowed down a little bit in terms of all the reported activity, which is good. House checks were down. More people are staying at home. They were down about 300 over the same time period from the previous year. Everything else slows down. Reports are down. One thing I would like to point out from our reports, we had 2 people report that they lost weapons. They lost handguns. Fortunately, both of them found their guns within a couple of weeks, one of which he had placed his gun on the hood of his car and then drove off and then found the thing like 2 miles away on the side of the road. Luckily, a child or somebody else didn't find it. And then on another one, a person that normally carries a gun on his hip in a holster realized late in the day after they'd run a bunch of errands that their holster was empty. So they backtracked and did a bunch of checking and eventually found their gun in the landscaping outside their house where they'd been picking up leaves and things like that. So it sounds to me like a policeman. So most policemen don't even carry a gun very well. All right. Let's see. With regards to the code enforcement, again, Rick is doing a great job. He issued 22 permits back in December. Most of which were dumpsters. He's checked as he's driving around. He found dumpsters, some that weren't permitted already. He obtained permits for them. Since they didn't get the permit in advance, the fee is actually higher when you discover a dumpster that wasn't previously permitted. The fee actually goes up. If you get the permit before you put the dumpster out, the fee's lower. So he's done a great job with that. Now, he did have some questions, and Tony Denham and I met with him last week because he was seeking clarification. And what he was trying to clarify was, we have the situation where the ordinance reads different than what we were doing in practice, because the permits will say one thing and then the ordinance was saying something else, because we were collecting deposits on a few things that the ordinance didn't allow for. So, for example, the dumpsters. On a dumpster, there's no mention of that within the ordinance. Yet for the past several years, at least, we've been collecting that. I've advised him to cease with that activity. And we've taken that, or we're in the process of taking that off all the permits. Ron is also in the process of taking that off the internet, because the one that's on the internet says the same thing. Now, that would be a question for you all in the future. If you want to modify the ordinance, then you can do that. And then that'll be a discussion for a later date. But for the time being, and so anyway, we sat down with Rick, Tony and I did. We went through all of the different situations that would generate a permit. And so we went through and we've ironed out everything that requires a permit, everything that requires a deposit. We went through each and every one of them. So now we're clear as to what we're going to collect, what we're not going to collect. So we're all on the same page as it goes to that. But we are going to be compliant with what the ordinance says, not what a previous permit says or what a past practice was, because I wasn't comfortable with that.
Well, and that's very good, because as you know, Randy Swan and I have spent several years working on our code enforcement dilemma. And the concept that somebody would read our ordinance and then something different would happen to them came up on a number of occasions, and it's not fair.
Right. Well, for example, like the dumpster, we were collecting $100 deposit for a dumpster. Now, eventually they would get that back, but it still created a little bit of a paperwork problem, because then we'd have to turn around and write them a check back, which made it a problem for the bookkeeper and everything. Mm-hmm. But we're collecting a deposit because it could potentially damage the roadway out front. Well, the problem with that was we don't allow dumpsters on the roadway anyway.
Exactly. Thank you.
So why are we collecting a deposit for something that we're requiring them to put them in their driveway? Well, if they damage their driveway, then so be it. That's sort of the way that I was looking at it. So there was a lot of situations that it just didn't make sense.
Well, thank you.
So
that's excellent.
Could you, Chief, at some point just make a list of those and make a recommendation if there's something like that, where there's a difference between?
Well, there won't be a difference now. We've cleared that up.
Where there was. Okay, let's see where there was.
Okay, well, there was only a few of them.
No, there's more. You'll find more.
Well, there was only a few of them where we were collecting in practice, where he had highlighted the ones that in practice where we were collecting deposits. That in particular, it was the dumpster and the pods, pod things that we were collecting on.
So there's none that you would recommend that we collect deposits on that you.
Well, I'll check again on that to see whether or not there's something we think.
Your recommendation
okay.
On whether a deposit is warranted, and we can act on it.
Okay.
Yeah, that would be good. One of the other things that is clear from all those ordinances is that the penalties are not sensible in some cases. And that was going to be the next thing that we took a look at, to see if there was some rational approach to all of those multitude of ordinances that were written over different periods of time by different people. So after he's been on the job a little bit longer, we'd love to sit down and talk to.
Oh, absolutely. Well, he's hard at it. He's really working hard at it. I appreciate them. And I actually appreciate that he'll come to us if he has any questions and wants clarity. And he's been really good for us. But, okay, does anybody have any questions?
But you have, there's a pool and fence installation. Was that after the fact?
Let's see.
It's on the right-hand side there.
Yes, we did check on a pool that had been installed, and then there was a fence. There was technically a problem with the fence that had been installed. I guess you'd call it the clasp on the fence was in violation. You know, they're supposed to close behind you automatically. It wasn't doing that. And so anyway, he pointed that out. And then the people that put the pole in, they actually had the installer come back and make the correction on
Okay,
that.
so they were correctable.
Yeah, it was a correctable thing and easily
You didn't have to tear
correctable.
down a fence or.
No, it
Or
was a
take
very,
out
it was
the
a very easy, it was a very easy fix.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, any other questions?
What is a TBUT?
What?
Felony report November 18th.
Taken by unknown, isn't it?
What's the?
Theft by unlawful taking.
Oh, the
thank you.
T-Butt.
Thank
Okay,
you.
I'm sorry.
T-Butt.
Yeah. Yeah, most of the thefts that we had were unlocked vehicles, which continues to be a problem. And we did have, now they're not reflected here, but in the past few months, a couple of the thefts from autos did involve weapons. Again, people that left their cars unlocked and left a gun either in the console or in the glove box. And, you know, we can say it till we're blue in the face. Not only, I think, is it irresponsible to leave your car unlocked, but then to leave a gun in there on top of that is just inexcusable. in
They
my
probably
book.
left a credit card in there too.
Oh, yeah, that's frequent. Most people, I guess, have an aversion to putting a wallet in their pocket. They put it in the car. So, particularly young people, I've never understood that.
They don't carry wallets.
Yeah.
That it, Jeff?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving into new business, we have a proposed first reading of an ordinance amending the budget. Is there a motion for giving a first reading?
I'll make a motion for a first reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
I'll second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Now we're open for discussion. So here, no discussion.
Actually, yes, there's plenty of discussion. I think that we don't know where to start. I agree with some of what's in here and disagree with other parts of it. But before we even get there, one of the things that we did this year on purpose was to enact a 15-page document that separately contains the individual items like the ones that we talked about in regard to the parks. What we're being asked to approve is another global budget with no specifics attached to it. And I, for one, cannot vote on a document that does not contain the individual items that we're approving.
Well, I will say two things in response to that. One is what you're not able to vote for is what we've done in every previous year that I've been here. And the second is that the workbook that attaches to the budget is not a part of the budget. We're really talking about apples and oranges. We're talking about the budget ordinance, and then we're talking about the budget workbook, which gives all the detail and which we can put out on our webpage so everybody can see it.
Would you have problems with us voting separately for each of them?
Voting on what do you mean on separately on each of them?
Voting on the ordinance and then voting on the workbook?
Well, the workbook isn't here. It's not up for a vote. I mean, I don't know what you would accomplish by voting on the workbook. The workbook ties into the budget ordinance. It's just a 15-page budget ordinance is a nightmare and a minefield to administer. And we've never done it before this year, and I don't think we should do it. And our peer cities actually have shorter budgets than we do.
Well, as we develop this, the current budget, which is being amended, there was a lot of discussion on certain of these items, and I think that by doing a global approach to the budget does not allow any debate or discourse or expression of points of view of some of the details. So,
Frank, do you have this document, this workbook?
yeah.
Well, you can debate anything in the workbook that ties into the budget. You're not
I'm
limited
sorry,
what you can debate.
Well, you know, just for instance, the first thing comes out of here is the salaries, and that ties into the new employee handbook. And salary administration is a combination of base pay and benefits, and we're you know, we haven't been given anything that says that, you know, although there's a recommendation for an increase in salaries, we're missing one important piece of information, and that is whether or not the salaries that we currently pay are competitive, whether they're generous or whether they're meager. So just arbitrarily sticking, I don't know, 1%, 0.5%, anything on top of something without getting details on where we stand in regard to the peer cities and in the job descriptions is something that, you know, I'm comfortable with. I mean, I think if you look at the the employee handbook in here, it says that there will be performance evaluations, and there will be professional studies telling us what you know.
Page 87.
Page 87.
Because I noted the same thing. It says
Base salary and salary adjustment. There's a whole
market studies and pay analysis.
Yeah. So without having that data in front of us, I don't think we can make an intelligent decision on, you know, should we give, you know, a raise, or are we ahead of the field? And the other thing that I don't think we need to rush into this. This is really an unusual year. You have this COVID situation, but you also have the CARES Act. So one part of the economy that hasn't suffered at all is government employees, including our city people, and they've received, you know, what, $600 and then another, or $1,200 and then another $600. So I don't think that we have anybody that's, you know, starving, but I do think we need the data. If nobody, and I like Greg, I'm going to speak for everybody here, nobody wants our personnel, the city personnel, to have less than a competitive wage and competitive benefits. But you provided, or Laura provided recently, with data that gives us the benefit comparisons, but we haven't seen any salary comparisons. So I'm uncomfortable with saying, yeah, I really agree with 0.5% or whatever, on top of whatever somebody's making, and I don't even know what that is without more data. So, you know, it's a long way of saying I think there's more there's more discussion to be involved with the detail.
Well, one thing to the workbook, as I understand, it's not going to go away. There's a lot of good work went into that, a lot of careful thought, but it will still be there to guide the mayor in making his decisions. And I'm sure the mayor would keep us advised of any substantial changes from what's outlined in the workbook.
Actually, that has not been that has not happened in the past. One of the things that took us through the prolonged process that we went through is that we have, and you heard this a little bit earlier in our discussion, we have nickel and dime maintenance to death. If you stand and look at City Hall with the sunshine out there, which that doesn't happen often, it is in bad shape. The door we come in to go into the council chambers could be downtown, where it looks like downtown's a third world country. And so we specifically put money into various maintenance projects in the budget that we passed. If we enact a global or a overall thing, there is no guarantee that those maintenance projects will get completed, will even get started.
But as I understand the budgeting process, just because it's in the budget, there's no guarantee that it's going to be carried out by the mayor.
That's why we put the money in there, Doug.
Right, and I think sounds like they're good projects, but I'm not sure I see the problem with the proposed budget.
Yeah, I would agree. This proposed budget does not do anything for guaranteeing or not guaranteeing the work will be done. So I don't see that as relevant.
Any further discussion?
I do want to say I respect the work that went into the existing budget. I'm not trying to be critical of that at all. I just think this is a solid amendment.
Well, I'll go back to the salary administration point that I tried to make. Perhaps, 0.75 isn't enough when evaluated against our peer groups, or maybe it's too much. How do you get an arbitrary number like that thrown into a budget and say, whoopee? I mean, we have now, and we've waited. This was initiated over 2 years ago, the project to get this employee handbook done. And apparently in John's executive order, it came in September. But I hope you understand my point. There are things within this budget, line items, like the parks. I mean, if we put 45,000, if 45,000 is the right put in, that should be part of it. Now, I don't have any disagreement with some of these changes that don't need discussion. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. The revenue section, and then the changes that came about with the code enforcement officer and change in the authority, going to the police department. Those changes we should be approving an amendment to deal with those things.
Actually, there also, in terms of these numbers, there are things that we felt were important that all of us voted for that have been removed from the amended budget. For example, there have been safety issues over the years whenever we end up with council meetings that we are overloading our parking lot and we're overloading the council chambers. And this happens, I've been around quite a while, this has happened on a number of occasions. We have now for 3 years put money in the budget to create an overflow area using digital technology in the library. That money has been removed from this amended budget. Another item that has been removed is that we have wanted for a long time to understand what our maintenance people are doing in conjunction with what our contract maintenance people are doing. And we put money in the budget for our maintenance folks to get hardware and software so that we can create maintenance logs so that we can tell people what we're doing with our money. That money has been removed from this budget also.
I think it's all a very good discussion. I would suggest we go ahead and vote on the first reading.
We don't vote on a first reading.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought there was a motion. I thought we would vote on the motion.
Doug's right. There's a motion on the floor to have a first reading of this document. And that's what we've been discussing. But if the discussion is now over, we come to a vote on the motion. So we'll just vote for it or against it. And we'll start with Mr. Farnsley.
Yes, I vote yes.
Mr. Fulcher,
No.
Mr. Gibson,
Yes.
Mr. Hulsman,
Yes.
Sarah Odell,
Yes.
Mrs. Leonard.
No.
4-2, the motion carries. And therefore, I would ask Don Gibson to give it a first reading. You know how to do that, Don?
No.
Well, just read the part in all caps ending with June 30th, 2021. Let's read that out loud.
An ordinance amending the budget for general fund of the city of Prospect for the fiscal year beginning July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2021.
And read the caption, the city of Prospect, Kentucky.
City of Prospect, Kentucky, ordinance number 603, series 2021.
Okay. Now out of first reading. Now, Andrea Schindelbaumer from the League of Cities has been patiently waiting for over an hour to talk with all of us about the new employee personnel policy manual, which everybody has had, and you may have questions about. In the copy I have, and I trust the ones that you have, the parts that involve potentially or actually money are all highlighted in yellow. So that's the part that requires council approval or not.
Mayor, could I be recognized, please?
Certainly.
Just a thought to share with the council. I really like this, but there is an awful lot to absorb here. And I'm sure that there are many, many questions. I assume we have someone from KLC who's going to join us. Oh, I see her there now, Andrea. So I was wondering if we want to set aside, before we get into the discussion, a certain amount of time. I mean, who knows how long this will take, and we'll go along as we go. May I suggest that maybe we allocate 60 minutes, if that's not too long? And then if we don't get through it, that we end at that time after 60 minutes and then come back and revisit this in February. There's a lot to this. Just a thought.
I think it's a good idea to set out a time frame. I would suggest that we consider a shorter time frame than 60 minutes for that discussion. 30 minutes is more than adequate. We've had this document for a number of weeks.
Andrea, I'm going to ask you to make a speech.
I'm sorry, what was that?
I would like you to talk to us about this employee handbook, what you went through doing it, whatever it is you'd like to say about it.
Okay. Well, it did take quite a bit of time. It did, like you said, it started in 2018. The city, worked really hard on putting this together to make sure that it was in compliance with federal laws, with state laws, with your actual practices. I mean, this is not a KLC policy. This is a city policy. We also make sure that it's in compliance with what our KLC insurance practices are. And that's to make sure that when they come and do your loss control scorecard, that it helps on your insurance premiums. So the next time that they come in, and I can't remember who your insurance loss control person is right now off the top of my head, but when they come and do your loss control scorecard, it should help your insurance premiums when they do that, this policy being done. So that's definitely a benefit to all. It should help on liability issues as well. And we'll work with you all for the next 4 years to make sure you stay in compliance with state and federal laws. And if you have any policies that just don't work for you practically, we'll help you to make sure that that we change those, we rewrite them for you, whatever you need. So there's, that's basically what we did. It's just make sure that you're in compliance with the laws as they are now. So if you have specific questions as far as the policy itself, anything in there, just feel free to ask me. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Okay, the floor is open for anyone that wants to ask questions to Andrea.
Andrea, this is Frank Fulcher. Just a generic question. In section 5,
Okay.
the financial practices, in my experience, that's been part of another type of manual, an operating manual for a company, as opposed to inclusion in an employee handbook. I'm just not familiar with having, really an accounting or fiscal policy included. And is that normal?
Well, these are more the reimbursement policies for your employees, travel requests. So if an employee wants to, get some type of training, or they have some type of expense reimbursement, or let's say they purchase something for the city and need reimbursement, it tells them how they get reimbursed and what they're allowed to be reimbursed. If they travel in their own vehicle, what they're allowed to be reimbursed, or meal reimbursements, things like that. Some other things that we cover in this section talk about, and they are things that don't have to be in here. Most of this doesn't have to be in here. It's informational purposes for the employees. But we do talk about disposal of city property. That doesn't have to be in there, but we like for employees to know that even if something is a piece of junk in the city, we can't just hand it over to an employee. Even if it's broken, we can't fix it. There's a process that the city has to follow. So we want employees to understand that. We want them to know that we're not being difficult as a city. There's a process for how things have to be done.
A little nitpicking comment here. In the city government
Sure.
organization, the line that says the majority of Kentucky cities operate under the mayor council plan, including most third, fourth, and fifth class cities. I thought we did away with those.
Where does that say that? Because that should not be in there.
Page
Yeah, it's
8.
in the beginning.
Page 8.
Oh, I do see that. And we may not have, and this has not been proofed yet. So let me say that as well. I went through it today. I'm not the one who actually drafted this. So I took this over today, and I actually found some things that I want to fix in here as well. But we have someone in our office that does professional proofing. They will proof this as well before it is actually finalized. So definitely that is something that would need to come out of there. Very good catch.
Andrea, this is Greg Hulsman. Did I give you enough time to make some notes on Frank's? Okay. So Greg Hulsman, I did this by section, so a lot of my questions are going to follow the same chronology that is in this book. So my very first one was under inclement weather.
Uh-huh.
And so I have a whole lot here, but let me try to boil it down. So I couldn't find anything. Oh, let me back up. So the way I approached my analysis of this was I tried to look at what did the law require, and if it wasn't required by law, then that's something that's optional. But certainly, if it's required by law, then we have to do it. So back to the inclement weather, I couldn't find anything in our state laws saying that all employees would be compensated in the event of closure.
That's correct. So what happens when, and this rarely happens, that City Hall closes. I mean, rarely. And I'm always scared to say that because the first time I do, we end up with a huge snowstorm next week. But it rarely happens. But if it does, One of the things that we tell cities is if you close City Hall and you tell an employee it's too dangerous to come in, we don't want you to come in, but you got to use your vacation time, what is that employee going to do? They're going to come in anyway. And so we don't really want that. That's not the purpose of us closing City Hall. We want you to stay home. Other issues come up if we have exempt employees. And I know we don't have a lot of exempt employees in the city, but there can be issues with docking pay when we have exempt employees. We also want to make sure we address our essential employees. And for your city, your essential employees are your police officers. And they're still going to come in no matter what. It doesn't matter. They're like the Postal Service. They work no matter what. So we want to make sure it's clear to them that even if City Hall closes, you still have to be there. And we want to make sure it's clear to them that that's the case. And then as part of this policy, the city decided we were going to provide a little incentive for the officers because they have to do that. Even though it's part of their job, we want them to know we appreciate the fact that they still have to come in and the job that they do.
Andrea, as a kind of follow-up on that, so today more than ever, many of us are not only working remotely, but we have the capability of working remotely with our cell phones and our computers and even the toolboxes that we have. We can do things without actually going physically to City Hall.
Right.
So how does that play in? So let's say that there's an emergency, we have 20 inches of snow, we close City Hall, but the mayor says, you know, I still need this work to be done. I'd like for you to complete this at home. So that's work done. So work done, whether you're exempt or not exempt, must be compensated. So how does that work then with this policy? They're working from home.
Okay. If an employee can work from home, then, you know, their supervisor should let them know that that's something they should still do. So if that's a possibility for them, they should let them know that they should. And we can even include that in here, that if that's something that you all want, that if that's an ability for that employee, that we expect them to continue to work from home. And there is a section in here that talks about non-exempt employees who work from home and that they need to track their hours and keeping up with that time.
Okay, thank you.
One of the things that's very noticeable in this is the huge increase in some of the benefits. Could you explain how that came about?
What benefits? What? I'm not sure. Vacation time? The only one that I remember being increased was for the first year. Is that the only one that you noticed?
No, the one that got me was 6 weeks at the end of 10 years.
That is pretty typical. And I think what we did was a comparison. I remember when we first met with the city, we said we were going to give them a comparison with other cities their size. So that probably came about as that comparison.
I don't know. The few cities around here that I've talked to don't have anything approaching 6 weeks at the end of 10 years.
Okay.
And here, the comparison you showed didn't show anything close to 6 weeks. Even most of them had 160 hours after 10 years.
4 weeks at the end of a prolonged period of time, like 20 years.
The comparison you have here shows that our current policy is way ahead of everyone else if we did this comparison. Right.
And I don't know, because again, like I said, I wasn't working on that part of it. And when I looked at it today, and I must have misread it, because the only change that I saw was in that first year, and I know why they did it, and that was because the police department employees are required under statute to have 15 working days that first year. And I think that's why they made the change for that first in paragraph A. in paragraph 2A, but I didn't notice the other changes. So that's something that I did not see. So I don't know, maybe the mayor, do you know? So I did not notice that big of a change at all.
Well, if the comparison's accurate, we're quite a bit out of line with, and it's above most other cities.
And was
Don,
that
you mind
in
helping me out
paragraph,
for-
are we talking about paragraph 2?
I'm talking about, we were handed a comparison. It says vacation leave hours, and it's got population range of cities, number reporting year 1, year 5, year 10, and year 20. And for cities from 3,000 to 7,999, year 1 it showed 52 hours, year 5 80, year 10 120, year 20 160, and
Andrea, he's looking at the benefit survey from the from KLC's 2020 wage and salary survey.
Okay.
Yeah, the
Okay.
benefit.
I don't have that in front of me, but I can pull it up.
well, is that the comparison that you discussed?
No, I know that we, at the very beginning in 2018, talked about comparing benefits with cities your size, but I don't know what was pulled, if anything. I didn't see it in the file when I looked it up.
Well, it's not just 1 or 2 lines. I agree with Mr. Gibson. Right now, our full-time employees get somewhere between 80 and 192 hours. In this, it goes from 120 to 240. I mean, it's a huge increase. And we have not been provided with the economic impact of any of these very large changes.
Well, and
So-
one other thing is, you know, they did put, we did have some caps put on the vacation leave. We did make sure that there were caps put on. I think 360 hours is the max that anyone can be paid out. If they've worked less than 10 years at the time of the adoption of the policy, the max they will get is 280 hours. And that, my understanding is that's if they, no, that's at 360 less than 10 years, 280. So that's the max that they can be paid out.
But that's not
So
what
it
we're
wouldn't
talking about.
matter
We're
how
talking
many
about
they approve.
not the cap. We're talking about the increases. For example, right now, we don't have personal leave. This would give them a day per year. Right
Right.
now, our sick leave is less than what's written in here. And I'm trying to figure out why all these benefits have been radically changed.
Well, and I do know that the sick leave, most cities do give 8 hours per month sick leave. And I think previously, I think yours was maybe 6 hours a month previously.
This is going to
I know it was
96 hours a year.
Right.
Now,
We
I do
currently
have a-
get 4 hours a month of sick leave.
Correct.
And that's
I do have a-
definitely lower than most cities.
I do have a question, and it's piecing together what Sandra was saying. So Laura, you might be able to point me in the right direction. I'm just making sure I'm looking in the correct spot. So I'm seeing, Laura, I think you hand wrote, or maybe Andrea, somebody hand wrote on the left-hand side of this sheet that I think we're all looking at, and it says old and new. And I'm not
Right.
seeing anything jump from 120 to 240. I'm seeing year 1, 80 to 194, and the new changes 120 to 204, and then a 5-year, and then a 10-year. The 10-year I actually see go down, and the 20-year I see go down. As in old, it was 192 to 256, and now it's just straight 240. So I'm just making sure I'm not seeing anything.
256 there is for police. The 190 is
Which is different.
Yeah, the 256 is for police,
Right.
and it doesn't show it in the news. So it goes from 190 to 240 after
Right.
Gotcha.
10 years.
So 240 for everybody. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. I was trying to follow here. So what Don and Sandra, you're saying it removed the clarification between, I guess, sorry, that's the part I'm missing. It removed the clarification between
Under the
the
old
police and
two
everybody else.
sets, the set on the right is the police, set on the left is the other.
Mine are just saying old and new, but I will take your all's word for it here.
Well, another area where it's interesting is that salaried employees are not getting overtime. Exempt employees are not getting overtime. And yet, when we get to page 86, they're getting comp time at time and a half.
That's actually a long-standing practice, Sandra. It's just never been put in writing.
Actually, that became a major issue when Chief Wilson retired here from the police department and Ann Sims was approaching retirement age. And the mayor at that time looked into it and comp time was not given any longer at time and a half for exempt employees. You shouldn't, you're exempt.
It makes sense to me. Can I change gears there?
Is there a way that we can get a subcommittee of the council to study all this and come to agreement? I mean, I understand the points that are being exchanged here, but this doesn't seem to me to be accomplishing a result. And if we were to appoint among yourselves, say a three-member committee to go through all these issues and come up with a consensus and then present it to Andrea as here's what we think would be right for us, that might be a way to solve the problems.
I think that might be a good idea. And in addition to what you suggested, I think anytime we're changing from what we are currently budgeting for, we need to know the economic effect of that change.
Right.
To that point, could Laura be on that committee as well? I think we need someone who represents the staff or management, because at the end of the day, you have to manage to this policy.
I'm hearing a lot of silence coming from Laura. If Laura's involved in it, I will be.
Right. I just, with the website taking off, I don't know if I'll be available. I mean, I'll make myself available as best as I can. I just can't make any promises.
Let me ask this, is there a time constraint in any way, shape, or form on this?
Yeah, we've been going at breakneck speed here. We've done it in 2.5 years. I don't, the straight answer is no.
I mean, it's very, very important. And not to sound like a broken record, but I didn't want to rush through it. But it still would be good to utilize some time here to ask Andrea while we have her for some questions. But I guess we didn't get a consensus on your suggestion, John. Is everybody on the council in agreement with that? And does anyone want to volunteer to serve?
Frank would say, what's the sense of the council here?
One of the things that might help to get it started is Andrea looked at this and she found some things today. If she would finish her look and tell us what those are before we proceed as the mayor suggested, I think that would be very helpful.
I can do that. Let me do that. And I will try to get it back to you by the end of next week. Will that work?
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can I pitch one
Yeah.
thing just for everybody to think about? Since it sounds like there may be some revisions, and I realize this may not go down well, but I did want to advocate for at least a thought put into paid parental leave versus unpaid parental leave. And I'm in favor of it in any amount. I can do a quick run through of, you can read all about why it's a great policy, but employee retention, especially females, but employee retention across the board, male, female, you created a whole human being or supporting a human being, and that's the worst time to not get paid. The stress induced, so you get higher morale, better worker productivity, longer term worker retention, high skilled labor retention. You save from having to find new employees, positive impact on the child and early development, plus healing and recovery for the parents or foster parents, et cetera, themselves. So just a push for, I'm down for any amount. I will say the AFLAC, I don't know if anybody did any research, but I did call AFLAC. I know it's written in here that the employees could pick up an AFLAC short-term disability. That would be for pregnancy. There are some caveats that I think make it almost impossible to use. And those are that it's no good unless you sign up for that AFLAC benefit 10 months prior to delivery. So you have to pay an extra premium before, people are planners, and times life is not a huge plan. So I'm not going to go into how babies are made or handled, but there is some amount of,
Explain that to you, Sarah. I can tell you how that happened.
yeah, okay, so we'll do that. We'll hit live and we'll change that up. So anyways, so it's not good for 10 months. So say even you were thinking about it now, in terms of privacy, you have to go communicate with your employer. Hey, I'm looking to get pregnant, which for me being in the military, people knew I was pregnant before Jeff did. And it took 3 attempts to have Charlotte. So that's a very personal, kind of embarrassing, shameful sort of thing in terms of miscarriage. It's a whole disaster to have to inform people when you're not prepared. So anyways, AFLAC, the 10 months prior to delivery, the plan does not kick in. It only covers a percentage of your pay. So you're still talking about not receiving the full benefits. And then it only covers 6 weeks for vaginal delivery, 8 weeks for cesarean. And again, that's at partial pay. And then let's see, I think those are the things I write down. So I toss that over there and I will follow up as much as I can, but I'm a big advocate for supporting in that manner.
Okay,
I
Sarah,
am as well. And I can tell you it's a great recruiting tool for cities. And I can tell you that cities have told me after they have enacted policies where they had paid parental leave, that they have been able to hire some phenomenal employees, especially police departments. So it's worked really well for cities. And it's kept police officers from sometimes jumping to other departments, because sometimes they will, because they don't get the best benefits. Maybe they don't get the highest pay from you, but they can get it somewhere else. So those benefits sometimes can make the difference.
Actually, the reason we're laughing is that almost all of our employees, this would truly not affect, right?
True, it's true. But I'm going to advocate for the city we want to have, not the city we are now. So I'm just, and I'm talking about benefits. I should be careful. I'm not talking about the age of people. I'm talking about, like at some point there may be somebody who needs it. So that's what.
Who would like to volunteer to be on this study committee?
I would.
I will.
Who?
I'll volunteer Greg if he didn't volunteer already.
No, he didn't volunteer. I was going to say Sarah ought to be on it with this paid parental leave.
Sounds good.
You be on it, Sarah?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay, so let me refresh. I know Don said yes, and I think Doug said yes. Is that right?
Sandra.
Oh,
Sandra.
I always confuse Doug and Sandra. Okay, Don Gibson and Sandra Leonard and Sarah Odell. And I'll leave it to you to get together on your own and get going with Andrea Schindelbauer. I think we're done with this part, and Barnsley's 30 minutes is up. So there's one other thing I would like to do, and that is to schedule a special meeting to consider the passage of the amended budget. And the reason I feel a little time pressure is that one of the parts of this is for the KIPTA grant 80/20 proposal. That's in this amended budget. It's not in the budget as it sits now. And that could come along, I don't know, any day. Greg Hulsman might have a better feel for that, but I was told to expect to have to commit the city or go fish in January or February. I haven't been asked to commit to it yet.
May we ask a couple of questions about that project? Those of us who don't know the answers.
Yes, ma'am.
One is, I understand that we were not given the grant for the lights. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. It would have been helpful if you had shared that information with all of us, because it makes us look at this request slightly differently. The second thing is, I understand that the whole purpose of this is to look at the safety on 42. Is that correct?
Yes, Greg jumped in here, but Greg's been the this, he and Herb Schulefer, but yeah, that's correct.
Yeah, let me chime in a little bit, Sandra. Yes, safety for sure, but that's a very, very broad category. So let me just say that it's an opportunity to work with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet to look at anything remotely connected with safety. And so we all know that we've had a tremendous impact on US 42 through the city. So we will be working on a scope of work that would cover all of the incidences and opportunities that would occur between I-265 and Rose Island Road. And that's a recommendation from the Transportation Cabinet.
Okay, no, I think I think the biggest problem for this city is US 42. It cuts the city in half and it's unattractive. My second question is, when all of this study is completed, and here's my concern, it is a federal highway administered through the state and Metro. I would hope we would keep in mind the fact that any long-term commitment of funds, in my mind, needs to start with the federal government, not with our residents. I think looking at safety is a very prudent idea. I think having our people fund the federal government is not a prudent idea. We pay federal taxes, we pay state taxes, we pay Metro taxes. And so I would hope that we do not incorporate into our relationship the concept that we're cash cows.
Absolutely, Sandra.
Greg, would you speak to the 80/20 grant?
Please, Sandra, absolutely. And the working group would totally agree with that. And of course, I do, and Herb does, and the mayor does, and everybody. We asked KIPTA that very question at the onset before we even knew that we would get a grant, because we said, well, if we do, then what does that do? Does that entrap us or engage us in any way towards responsibilities for a federal highway? And they said no. And after we got the grant, we went to the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, and Herb and I and several others were involved in the meeting with Larry Cheney. And we asked that question again, and he said, no, that's not the purpose of it. Those things they're controlled by the federal government. That's their responsibility. And if it was that kind of a magnitude, we couldn't afford it anyway. If it's something like a roundabout or additional lanes, we're not going to get into that kind of thing. So, but what we can do is a great opportunity for the city of Prospect to have a voice in our future. And as we went around and we talked to the city of J-Town, the city of Stephenville, the city of Middletown, the senators and county judges, and on and on and on, the answer that we kept getting back was, these are major improvements that we can make at 20 cents on the dollar that heretofore Prospect has not taken advantage of. So we think that by doing this, well, we know that by doing this, we will establish a relationship with the Kentucky Transportation Cabinet such that we will have a say in what gets done in the future, instead of them just saying, well, we'd like to do X or Y or Z, and here it is, Prospect, just take it. So we're going to be establishing a relationship with them that will service us and help us, not just for the next year, but for decades ahead. So it's a great opportunity to create our future and create our vision for the city.
Actually, piggybacking on what you just said, my final question, I know you just breathed a sigh of relief. My final question is, who is going to write the parameters of the study, and who is going to supervise the quality of the work product?
I don't know if Herb is still on the call.
No.
That would fall mostly to Herb, and I know that he was going to want to put together a task force to do that, so.
Okay, I'd like to see you, I like Herb, he's an architect. We're talking about a highway. I'd like to see you include somebody with highway experience.
Okay.
To my
Questions?
knowledge, Greg, KYTC is the one who will have a representative from the city, which Sandra, I know that's exactly what you're asking. But to my knowledge, in terms of who's like that work quality of like, hey, Greg mentioned a roundabout, so a work quality of that, the Kentucky.
Well, I'm
Cabinet
concerned
would be
with the construction
function?
of the construction of the project having enough detail in it that we do end up with what Greg hopes we get. We, as a city, have done studies in the past, and what we get back is muff and fluff. And I would hope that as long as this one's going to be incredibly expensive, it will have very real things in it.
Totally agree. I'm looking at the study that was done last time, and it's a half of an inch thick. And I've gone through it from cover to cover, and it's a good study, but it really doesn't give you anything to sink your teeth into. And I think that's what you're saying.
You've got that in spades. What they do is they come out and take a picture of what you've got. They talk to everybody. They put little things on the pictures, and the conclusions are what everybody said to them. And that, in this case, is not going to give us a final product that's valuable.
Right. It will be night and day.
Did Herb send out to everybody that outer loop study, Sandra? Did you get that?
I don't think so.
Maybe we should get it to you, because that's pretty specific.
It is.
Actually, we've gotten almost nothing, to be honest with you. So anything you send will be great.
Well, but yeah, that is, just to give you a heads up of what it is. It'll be a pretty big document. I'll have to look. Greg, can you be in charge? You probably have a folder of it, the outer loop study. Can I ask you to send that to
Sure,
whoever
absolutely.
doesn't have it, show of hands. It is super specific, and that's one they just did. That's one they sent to that Tom Hall, the District 5 people here sent, that were like, this is an idea of how your study would be laid out. So it's a boring but very good read.
Thank you.
Okay,
Sandra, we'll take you on a tour, because I read the recommendations and then drove it.
Oh, that's fantastic.
It's very good.
Excellent.
I need to schedule our special meeting for later this week, Wednesday or Thursday or Friday.
You mean for the handbook?
No, for the
A special meeting. Okay.
special meeting for the sole purpose of considering the passage of the amended ordinance.
John, I'm good any day except Thursday.
Okay, so we've got Wednesday and Friday.
If somebody mentions a
I'm good for
time,
either
that'll
day.
help me narrow it down with Jeff's out of town, so it's just me and Charlotte. But if somebody has an idea what time it would be, that would help me out.
About any time after 12 noon on Wednesday.
That would
We
be
could go.
perfect.
I'm good.
Well, I'm not available at noon, but I could be available by 1:30 and the rest of the afternoon.
I have to
Yeah,
be
well,
out the door at
how about
2:45.
2 o'clock on Wednesday?
I have to be out the door at 2:45. So
How about 1:30,
if you're
Sheriff?
happy
That
with,
work?
1:30 would work for me.
Sheriff,
1:30
would 1:30 work for you?
sounds good.
1:30 on
What day?
Wednesday?
Wednesday. Okay.
Wednesday, the 13th, 1:30.
Yes, sir. Okay, let's move on with the rest of the agenda. Unfinished business. Any unfinished business? Any comments from citizens?
Have we been giving them the WebEx links?
Laura, do you know the answer to that?
It wasn't.
It was on.
Oh, we're waiting
on
for
this
Laura to
meeting.
come off mute. I had a question about that. I wonder,
think it was
is,
us.
for Chris Gorman, I know Sandra had sent that email, and I saw your response that said, hey, probably the WebEx link should be included. And I thought about it later. I thought it used to say, hey, if you want to be able to talk at a meeting, contact the city to get a link. But then I thought, well, that makes sense. You put the link in the email. But Chris, do you know, since City Hall's still open, so technically we're still having meetings, we're just having additional virtual meetings? How is all that meshing?
No, I think if you're going to have a virtual meeting, I think you ought to give the public the opportunity to speak at a meeting if they want to.
Yeah, and I don't think they should separately have to contact City Hall. I agree with
Fine
what
with me. I was
Mr. Gorman
curious.
just said.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, so we just send the link out to, when we send out the notice to everybody in the city.
That's my recommendation.
I think that's a good point, Sandra. Glad you caught that also.
If everybody gets that.
Is it Ron that we need to ping for that? Does anybody know?
The YouTube, on the announcement of the meeting, the YouTube and WebEx thing you click on is on here.
Actually, the YouTube has always been on there. The WebEx looks like it is selective. And I agree with Mr. Gorman. It shouldn't be selective. It should be on there with maybe a statement before it with what Sarah said.
Yeah, I would say that if you all want to do that, I would go with what Sarah was saying and say if they want to speak, to request the link. Sending out the link citywide is a horrible idea.
Wow.
Because you're now opening up the meeting to the entire city. That's where Zoom ran into a problem. They were sending out 100 links and people were getting on there and messing around.
Oh.
What do you mean messing around?
Well, porno, which can make the meeting more interesting, but not really appropriate.
People playing music and stuff.
Yeah.
You can't kick people off the meeting. That's
Think
a good
about
point.
the audio problems we have now. Now multiply that by, let's say on a good night, we've got 15 people watching. Now add 15 more windows to that.
Don't you have the ability to mute people?
We can, but I would literally have to sit here and continuously monitor every microphone.
Well, from a practical standpoint, you're not going to have 10 people will be in addition to the people we have now. And I think two things. From a public policy consideration, we need to be the administration of inclusion and the people that want to attract other people to our meetings as opposed to being exclusionary. That's number one. From the law standpoint, it says that when you have a telecommunications meeting, I think it means that both parties have the ability to communicate.
I'm sorry, you broke up there, Chris.
I think both parties should have the ability to communicate if you've got a telecommunication meeting. I think that's what that means. And I think when you read KLC's where you said they could see or hear that would be adequate. I think they added that to the Attorney General's opinion. I'll bet you that if I talk to KLC, they'll change their mind on that. If they don't, if we had to go to court, I would much rather have my side of it than their side of it.
Ron, as the administration host, do you have the ability, say someone who's obviously not there for the meeting, but is there like you're saying, like someone gets a hold of the link, because those people who were destroying JCPS classes on Zoom were not students that were in that class. Do you have the ability as the host to, if we get someone who is clearly not there to participate in the meeting, I'm not talking invalid opinions, I'm talking like, is there showing inappropriate visuals or screaming or whatever, and you can't take them off, you know, they keep unmuting themselves. Do you have the ability to remove that person, or
Yes, yes, they can be. I can throw anybody out of the meeting.
That's why we
There,
had
please.
WebEx, that they're more secure than Zoom to begin with. Is it WebEx? That's why governments use WebEx?
Yes.
All right, I think we're done. So I'll ask if anybody wants to move to adjourn.
Roll Tide.
Are you watching the game, Chris?
Well, I just have to tell you that my grandson made a 4-point his first semester at Alabama, so I had to wear this shirt tonight. He takes after his grandmother, so that's a good thing. It's amazing the genes that the women add to the kids. This is just wonderful.
I just have to tell you, you look like James Carville.
What is it?
I don't pay this much.
We just got an update. It's 14-7 Alabama.
All right, good.
Doug Farnsley, do you want to move to adjourn?
I will make the motion that we adjourn.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? The ayes have it. We're adjourned. Thank you.
It was a
Thanks,
pleasure,
everyone.
ladies and gentlemen. We'll see you guys.
I enjoyed my first meeting. Thanks, everyone.
Good to have you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye. See ya.